Good evening. Welcome to Stab the Dragon. This is a special episode. We're going to do a book review today, but today is also October 3rd. So this is the 29th anniversary of the Battle of Mogadishu. And a year ago, I did a whiskey review of this whiskey, Hooten Young American whiskey, 12 year. There you go. And this is batch number 1. This brand, Hooten Young, is named for Norm Hooten, which if you watched the movie Black Hawk Down, the character in the movie named Hoot, that's Norm Hooten. Norm Hooten was a lifer in the Army and Delta Force, and when he got out finally from the Army, he started a whiskey company. And so it's called Hooten Young. And so this is not a bourbon. I reviewed this. It's an American whiskey. And so American whiskey has different rules than bourbon. It can't be aged in new charred oak barrels. It's got to be aged in either uncharred barrels or previously used barrels. It can be blended a little bit. So this is an American whiskey. It's not a bourbon. It's not a rye. And so a year ago, I did a review on this. So I thought it fitting here with the 29th anniversary of the Battle of Mogadishu. I'm going to remember the fallen, remember the heroism, remember the American fighting man who participated in that battle. And that was the Rangers, it was Delta Team, it was 10th Mountain Division was involved with that, and all kinds of support units, helicopter units that I don't remember all their designations. But cheers in memory of the fallen and those who survived but were crippled both physically and emotionally, and those who survived and continued to serve. That was just an American best of. Really, the politicians had totally screwed that all to pieces, but the soldiers performed magnificently. And so, cheers. Now, the book review that I have chosen to do tonight is kind of related, I guess, to the Battle of Mogadishu in a way, because the book is The Terminal List by Jack Carr. Jack Carr was a lifer in the U.S. Navy SEALs. And so, the relationship is special operator, special warfare. He retired from the Navy and started writing novels. And this is his first novel, The Terminal List. So we're going to look at this book tonight quickly while I sip on Hooten Young American whiskey. This book is published out of Emily Bestler Books in New York, 2019. 405 pages. I read this just recently in the month of September, and it was an outstanding read. Genre, this is a military thriller. Okay, so thrillers don't have to be military, but they're sort of related to politics and spies and military. My total point score for this is 22 out of 25 points. Letter grade, a solid A. A comparison. Jack Carr is in the same league as Brad Taylor and Tom Clancy. Okay, here's a Brad Taylor book, and I'll be reviewing this soon, I hope. Brad Taylor is a retired lifer, Green Beret, and Delta Team. So, he's in that same community. Lee Child is also with the Jack Reacher series in that genre of thrillers. Lee Child, as far as I know, had no military experience, but Jack Reacher is ex-Army, and so it's still in the thriller mode there, it's that genre. So the difference is that here in his first novel, that Reese has written, or about Reese. The guy's name is Reese. The protagonist, the main character, is Reese. He's a Navy SEAL, right? And the difference here is that in this first novel, the luck that Reese had seems to kind of overwhelm the novel a little bit. He knew a reporter. The reporter helped break the story, that what he was all about, what was going on there, the underbelly of the American military-industrial complex. He knew a Mexican millionaire who helped him with part of his operation here. He knew a techie guy who helped provide him the technical assistance that he needed to do what he needed to do. He knew a pilot who flew him from point A to point B. He knew a guy who owned a boat. And so all of that stacks up, and it's almost like Deus Ex Machina. So that's almost a fault, almost. The novel worked. Absolutely, it worked. But I'm just saying there was a whole stack of things that were a little bit lucky, okay? So, but it's still a solid A of a novel. It's right up my alley. Carr includes a lot more techie stuff about guns, whereas Brad Taylor, over here, he includes far more electronic techie stuff and tradecraft of the spy, right? So let me toss in another author who's sort of in the same league, but a slightly different genre of military sci-fi, and that would be Michael Z. Williamson. In some of his books, he gets so deep into the psychology of the warrior, it's amazing. Okay? So a science fiction thriller would be, or military sci-fi thriller, is what Williamson writes. The differences, though, between Taylor and Carr, and those are the two that I really want to compare the most here, Brad Taylor and then Jack Carr. Because they're very, very similar books, very similar themes. But the difference between the two may be due to some extent to the differences between Special Forces and Delta Team, which is Brad Taylor, versus Carr's experience as a SEAL sniper. There's different operating modes, and I think that comes out in their books. And I find those differences to be a good thing, right? I can read Taylor, and then I can read Carr, and they're in the same genre, but you get very different operational perspectives, right? Different emphases. And so that's fantastic. So if you've read anything by Brad Taylor, I really think you should try Jack Carr. So my recommendation, if you like military thrillers, absolutely, the Terminal List I highly recommend. Follow the James Reese story. If you want to see good versus evil in our political system, in our capitalism system, where there's a huge degree of corruption and that old fear of the military-industrial complex leading to political decisions that get people killed, oh, absolutely. Read this book. Read Jack Carr. Is it believable? So let's get into the details now. Is it believable? The basic plot, and here's a spoiler alert, involves politicians and military leaders and industrial leaders who are chasing lucrative contract deals to make a lot of money. Now, maybe you've noticed that people in Congress tend to enter at one economic level, and by the time they exit, they're many times higher. Politicians make money off of being politicians. They absolutely do. And so in this book, they experiment on some Navy SEALs and then have them killed to cover up the mistakes. One SEAL survives all those attempts to kill him. That's James Reese. And he hunts down the killers and those who were behind the entire mess. Is he successful? That remains to be seen. So this rather complex plot is actually quite believable. The characterizations of all those involved, the politicians, the business guys, the the killers themselves, and the SEAL, James Reese, the characterization of those involved is very believable. So is this novel believable despite, as I mentioned earlier, despite all the luck that almost results in Deus Ex Machina? Is this believable? Yeah, 4 out of 5 points. How about the action? The action is very detailed and highly believable. This guy's writing from experience, and so the action represents his experiences in 20 years of war. This book is not for the faint of heart. It's pretty gritty, it's gruesome in its details, and I think it's realistic. So action, 5 out of 5 points. How about technical accuracy? The author convinces me of the technical accuracy of the weapons, of the military in general, and of the nature of man. Okay, and that's the underlying theme here. It's a thriller. Yeah, there's a lot of action, but he is portraying the sinful, evil nature of man, the corruption in our political system, the corruption in the business world and capitalism, and how it ties in to the military. There's corruption in the military as some officers stand to profit from all this business, and whether it's professional or even financial, and so they're corrupt. This book is so believable, and it's technically accurate. So 5 out of 5 points for its technical accuracy. How about characterization? I think maybe the only major flaw is that it seems that Reese recovers too quickly from the disasters that befall him. There's a series of disasters that happen to this Navy SEAL. And granted, his manner of dealing with the tragedies is to resort to being the apex predator that he is. But still, it seems a bit rushed to me. It seems like how could anybody survive what he went through? And then, I mean, I get his motivation. He's out for revenge, pure and simple. This is about revenge. Reese lacks just a tad of the depth that one finds in, say, actually a lot of the depth that, say, in Michael Williamson's novel, The Weapon. Okay, if you want the psychological depth of what goes on in a soldier and a special operator, Michael Z Williamson's series is magnificent. He deals with the inner psychology of the warrior like nobody else I've ever read. Okay, so Reese, I think, rushes that a little bit here. So I could wish the author delved more deeply into the psychology and feelings of Reese. Also, some of the major key players, I don't think he gives enough characterization with them. So 4 out of 5 points. Again, this is an excellent book. Right. This is outstanding. So don't take my criticisms as trashing this book at all. I'm just saying, hey, this is what I would like to see next. So 4 out of 5 for characterization. And speaking of supporting characters, so here's another grading point here. I would wish, again, for more depth in the few supporting characters that I think would show up in future books. For example, Lauren Reese, that character, would have been more effective if we had been given maybe one chapter devoted to what goes on with her and her life and in her head as the wife of a Navy SEAL. I think back to Mel Gibson's movie, We Were Soldiers Once, and the domestic scenes where they flipped back and forth from the wives back at Fort Benning and then the combat scenes in Vietnam. That whole sequence in that movie was genius. It was remarkable, right? Or consider in the novel also Marco del Toro, who helped Reese immensely. I can easily see him showing up in the following novels, and so I need to see more about him and his motivations. I mean, there's some questions there. I mean, he comes across as a good guy, but he's got this dark side to him, right? And so I want to see a little bit more of that brought out. Or maybe we need to know more about Katie Buranek, the reporter. She's an outstanding character in this book, but I need to see a little bit more. I mean, the tie-in between Katie and James Reese was magnificent when he brought that out. So he did that well to show the history of how their families were actually had a point of contact in the past. I won't ruin that for you. But Katie Buranek, I think, is going to be in future novels. I think she may actually end up being a romantic interest, right? There's that possibility there. So I hope that's developed in the future novels. And I really see her as being a key to those future novels. The connection with her, I mean, yeah, that was an interesting connection, but again, it was so much luck, almost Deus Ex Machina, but it still worked, okay? And so supporting characters, I'm going to give the novel a 4 out of 5. So that gives me a total score there of 22 of 25 points. That's a solid A, absolutely. My recommendation then, if you like military thriller genre, then Jack Carr's for you. Okay, if you're a Tom Clancy fan from back in the day, here you go. This should work. If you're a Brad Taylor fan, this absolutely will work. If you're a Lee Child fan, this is going to be better than Lee Child. I've got some issues with Lee Child. I mean, the Jack Reacher series, there's greatness there, don't get me wrong, but boy, do I have some issues with Lee Child. So this book, though, Jack Carr, is along the lines of Brad Taylor's Pike Logan series, absolutely. The Jack Reacher series by Lee Child. For those of you who were reading this kind of stuff back in the 1960s and 70s and 80s, there are clearly, in my mind, links to Don Pendleton's Mack Bolan Executioner series. All you old timers, that should ring a bell, right? Because there's some very similar starting points with this book, with Brad Taylor's Pike Logan series, and with Don Pendleton's Mack Bolan series. There's a link there, and I don't know, who linked it to what, but man, do I see the link? It's strong. It's all over this book, right? And so, man, if you haven't gone back in time and read the Mack Bolan Executioner series, I highly recommend that as well. There's a common thread here, and you need to go back to the Vietnam War days and see that common thread. Books like this are great, not just for the action and the suspense and the intense feelings that come out of here. These books reveal a lot about the military ethos, the moral view of the world that says there are evil bad guys out there and they need to be dealt with in an effective manner. Now, if you're a bit squeamish, be aware this book gives some gruesome details. It's a tough read in places. If you've been to the wars and you've seen it up close and personal, this book may promote some PTSD healing, I would think, because of you see James Reese and what he goes through and how he deals with it. So in the end, the final result, Jack Carr is now one of my favorites. He rates up there with Brad Taylor and Tom Clancy, Lee Child, Michael Z. Williamson. So highest recommendation here, The Terminal List. Get it and read it. All right, well, this is Stab the Dragon drinking some Hooten Young. Hooten Young American whiskey. Batch number 1. Absolutely. Out here.